Hello everybody, today we're doing some seams on a patio. In this video we're going to get the old tape seams, the paper tape seams dug out, get everything secured with new screws, get it fiberglass, basically get it to the point where it's ready for first coat. With these tape seams, everybody thinks you just put fiberglass over the repairs and you mud over it, but there's a little more involved to do it correctly. Original builds, they use paper tape. I know you've probably seen paper tape in the drywall aisle at the store. That paper tape is used in these tools. It's called the bazooka. It's just an automatic taping tool that they use when they do large jobs, new homes, stuff like that. When they freshly sheetrock the house, all new sheetrock, they use these taping tools that help put on the tape, and then they go through and coat everything with these tools and get everything ready for texture. With these taping tools, they use a paper tape, but this paper tape fails after a while. That's why most repairs are done with the fiberglass mesh. I never really do repairs with paper tape. The only time I'll use a paper tape if there's big gaps or maybe in angles. A lot of guys like to use paper tape in angles so you can do a 90-degree crease with the paper tape. But whenever you do these stress crack repairs, you always want to dig out that old tape. It's tedious. You have to dig it out with your 6-inch knife. It takes a lot of time. After a while, you just want to give up and just say, I'm done with this, and just start taping over it. But the extra time you spend digging this out, it's going to really give you a better result at the end. Because what you're doing is you're basically getting that old tape out. You want to get all that old stuff out of there. You don't want to just put a band-aid over a band-aid. You got to get that old band-aid off, get it all cleaned up. And then the old tape, once you dig it out, leaves like a 3-inch groove where the old tape was sitting under the mud. So now that groove that you left from digging out that old paper tape, now you can put your fiberglass tape right on that groove. And now you don't have to go crazy with coating everything because you left that groove. So all you have to do is fill in that groove with mud now. With the first coat, do a tight first coat, tight second coat, and if need be, strike it in with the third coat, and then you can texture. This groove helps you so you're not putting a big old heavy coat on the joints and then crowning out your joints. A crown joint is when you basically see a hump in the ceiling. That's a crown joint. Just like the name says, a crown. You can see the hump. So we don't want to have crown joints whenever possible. Everybody thinks you just pile on a bunch of mud, but you're just filling in the area that needs the mud. Sometimes a little is enough. If go crazy. Anyone can put on a bunch of mud and sand it down, but you just want to put the materials where it's needed. And here we're just going to have to fill in that groove from digging out the old paper tape. This is on a patio, but the sheetrock's all the same. Houses inside. Sometimes if the walls or ceilings have fresh paint on it, these paper tapes are harder to dig out. If it's old flat paints, sometimes they'll just come right out. You pull them and the whole length of the tape will come right out. So you just got to work with it. A nice stiff 6-inch knife, even a 4-inch knife, just getting in there, prying it out, and you just got to work it, and eventually it'll give way and dig out. Once you get it all dug out, all that old paper tape, then you're going to go around and scrape everything, get all the loose stuff off, and then always go through and put sheetrock screws. This is a 1/2-inch ceiling with sheetrock, so we're going to use 1.25 to 1.5 drywall screws, coarse screws for wood framing. Tighten up all the trusses on each side. Add a bunch of screws, tighten up everything. More likely, most original builds, they just use drywall nails. And they just go through and nail up, tack up nails. But these nails back out. The reason a lot of homes have nails instead of screws, well, when they were building these houses, most houses didn't have power. I remember when I was working in new construction, sometimes having power and water on a job site was a luxury. So if they were sent to a job and they didn't have electric or generators, they would probably have to go through and just do nail install, which is still code. I think you just have to add like 2 more nails per row when you do nails. But whenever you do nails, it always backs out. And with nails, with the hammerhead, you're going to have to do an extra coat on it because you have deep hammerheads whenever you install sheetrock with nails. So we always go through and tighten up everything with screws. So if it is moving around from loose sheetrock, that will tighten it up and at least get rid of that problem. Once you get it all scraped, all the tape dug out, everything's checked, plenty of screws set in, then you're going to follow through with a fiberglass mesh. I know everybody wants to use these other tapes on the market. Paper tape, don't use. Just use a fiberglass mesh tape. You shouldn't have any problems with the fiberglass mesh tape if it's done correctly. It's a strong material. There's other tapes out there, infused tape, stuff like that. Sure, you can use these, but I just use fiberglass mesh tape and I never have any problems. Anything that ever cracked out from me using a fiberglass tape, it usually wasn't my fault. It was something else, movement, structural movement, or something to cause that. Basically, once you get it all screwed up, and then you do fiberglass, and then you do muds on it, anything to crack that takes a lot of movement. So you got bigger issues than just a sheetrock moving. You got structural wood movement, which is common in some of these houses. This is a patio. I know depending on your region, you probably don't have sheetrock on patios, but the process is the same in digging out the tape on all the joint seams. These are joint seams and then butt seams. The butt seams are the 4-foot seams that butt up against the sheets. The joint seams are where the sheetrock stacks on each other. So butted up is a butt seam, and then the regular joint seams are the longer seams. But basically, just get it all dug out. Pretty simple video. This is just going to be the part 1 of this video of doing the dig it out and basically getting it ready for mud. Then we're going to have to turn around and get it first coated by striking in that groove. I'm going to use a 5-minute hot mud. Then we're going to follow through and do a second coat, touch up, slick it out, and then we're going to follow through and do a sand skip trowel. As you can see, the original texture here looks like a skip trowel, but there's actually sand in it. So I also made another video of that, of doing the sand skip trowel. They just add silica sand to get that rough look. You can see on the right-hand side how they have stucco cement walls. So they put the sand and the texture in the drywall mud, and it gives it kind of a stucco appearance. Instead of doing stucco overhead, which is probably more expensive, they just do sheetrock on the patios and then give it a sand texture to give it that stucco appearance, cement finish look. So now we got all the tape dug out. It's time to do a first coat. Since we just dug out this nice trench where the old tape was, all I have to do is strike it in. I'm not sitting here having to blow out heavy joints with a 10 or 12-inch knife. Now I'm just using a 6-inch knife and striking in and filling in the groove that I left. That's the beauty of digging out the old tape. So you get the old tape out of there. It gives you a nice little notch so you can fill it in. It just makes the mudding easier. It just makes the repair go smoothly. It just makes everything clean and nice. You're not sitting here having to float out all these joints, crowning them out, making a big old hump on the wall or ceiling that you put heavy mud on. So you're just doing easy mudding. Your texture is just going to have to go out past your mud area. It just keeps everything easy and small, clean, easy job when you dig out the old tape like this. Of course, not all areas you're going to be able to get the tape out. If the cracks go diagonal and stuff like that, those are more stress related. These are the actual joint and butt seams that are cracking out. That's why you're able to dig out the old tape. Sometimes you'll get in a bind though. If you try to fix something that's already been repaired, you're going to run into fiberglass mesh tape. That's not as easy to dig out. Sometimes you get lucky, and if you dig deep enough and you didn't get the original paper tape under the repair out, you can dig under and get the fiberglass and the paper tape. But if they fiberglassed over it, then it's not as easy to dig out like this paper tape. Then you're going to have to do more of a C-notch effect. Then you're going to have to float out all your work. But whenever you fix cracks, always try to dig out the seams, get the old seams out, so it just makes your mudding go easier. On here, I'm just using a quick set mud. Of course, like on all my jobs, I have to use these quick set materials because I got to get the job done in one trip. If you're doing this by yourself, just use an all-purpose joint compound. For first coat, you leave it pretty thick. The mud in the box or the bucket's pretty heavy, but you want to kind of mix it up, put a little bit of water in it, mix it up nice and creamy. That would be your first coat mud. Then your second coat mud, you would add a little more water to the mud, mix it up real thoroughly, and then that would be your second coat. Then if you did a third coat, you just added more water. You just thin it down in between every coat. And this, we're not just piling on a bunch of mud. That's why I'm using my 6-inch knife. I'm just basically filling in this groove, doing a tight coat. Everybody thinks you put the mud on super heavy. You're just doing a tight coat. You're just filling it in. That's all the first coat is, just a fill in. Just striking it in. I'm not trying to take the mud past the area. I don't want to have to texture out this whole ceiling just to fix a few seams. Once you get everything coated, if you're using a quick set like me, you're going to have to let it start setting up. Then you're going to slick it out like we do here with the sponge. If you're using a joint compound, you're just going to have to let it dry overnight, turn around, sand it, then do the second process with second coat, and then follow through, let it dry again, then sand it and do a third coat. But with the hot muds, we slick out in between coats. We don't let the mud fully set up. It starts setting up. We have to sponge it and 6-inch knife it. It's called the slick out technique. This technique's only used with hot muds, quick set muds, like 5-minute, 20-minute, 40-minute, and 90-minute. So I just use these because it's a stronger material. It's more of a pro grade material. So if you don't know what you're doing, do not use hot muds. Even if you're in a bind to get the job done, just use an all-purpose joint compound. All-purpose joint compounds, the beauty with those, if you're a newbie, beginner, first time doing drywall, if you make a mistake, at least with the joint compound, you can sand away your mistakes. These quick set muds, they're called quick set because once you put the water in it, it activates it and it almost sets up like a cement. So you're working more with a stronger pro grade material with these quick set muds. So stay away from them if you don't know what you're doing. But yeah, basic thing, get it all coated out, and then we're going to follow through with a texture after we get everything coated out. But just watch and learn. It's simple, it's a long video, but this is just what it takes to do it. Of course, this job's going more efficient because I'm working on stilts. I try to use stilts whenever I can on jobs, especially these patios. Patio like this is almost 40 foot, 50 foot long, so that's why I'm using the stilts. If I had to do this ladder work, I'd be up and down a ladder probably 500 times before I even think about texturing. But yeah, just watch it and we'll kind of guide you in through here. It's just basic watch and learn. Fixing stress cracks on a patio. It'd be the same process if you're fixing stress cracks in the house, in a garage. Nice open patio like this, it's pretty easy to show you because it's just big, nice, open, wide room. Show you how we do it. Basically, you can see the cracks. It's basically like the sheetrock layout that we're fixing. You can see each sheet in between each crack. So just get them all repaired. And then the best thing they could do after they get this all repaired and textured is do a nice primer on it and use a high quality paint. The high quality paint will help protect it from the elements outside. Hot, cold, the wind does a lot of damage to these patios outside. So that's why I have so many patio videos. It's one of my go-to jobs out here because they like to use sheetrock out here. It's just a cheaper alternative in the builder to use sheetrock on these patios than it is to do stucco ceilings or wood lath, shiplap ceilings. So they do stucco on the walls on most houses out here, and then they do the
sheetrock on the ceiling. You could do other things besides sheetrock, but it's just more expensive. And when a builder builds a house, they're building it per square foot. So they try to do the cheapest, nicest thing they can do per square foot money wise. So that's why they do sheetrock out here. So depending on where you live, you probably don't have sheetrock patios. But out here, it's the most common thing. Everybody has it out here. But when they do have it out here, they just got to protect it with good paint. When it starts peeling like this, you got to fix it right away because it just keeps spreading and goes the full distance of the tape. So that's why you always want to repair your patios. If you start seeing them peeling or cracking, you want to get those dressed right away before they spread all the way across, all the way the width and the length of it. The texture starts peeling. It turns into a big nightmare if you don't get them repaired right away as you see them starting to peel. But yeah, simple video, watch and learn, drywall repairs, easy, easy, easy. I have other videos on the channel like this where we're doing stress cracks, patio repairs, patching, stuff like this, texture matching. Whole lot of videos on the channel. And if you haven't done it already, just go ahead and subscribe. Leave me a comment. And if you have been subscribed and you've been watching the videos, thanks for supporting and thanks for viewing. Now this is when this one gets interesting. We're adding silica sand to the texture. This is not necessary to do skip trowels. It's just on this one job. This is not a common practice we do by putting sand in the texture. But once in a while, I get onto these jobs and they have sand on it. That's why I keep the little container of silica sand. You could use other type of sands, but most sands out there are dirty, like playground sand. If you did use a rougher sand than silica, you would have to clean it out, strain it out with hose, water, get all the dirt and debris out of it. We like to use a silica sand because it's already been refined. There's no big clumps in it. Everything's nice and perfect. It just works best with silica sand in here. What you want to do is if you're doing a large project that you're going to need more than a couple pans of mud, you're going to have to mix it in a bucket, like a quarter of a bucket, half a bucket, larger project, a whole bucket. You would mix your all-purpose joint compound first. You would get that thinned down to like a heavy, heavy pancake batter consistency. Once you get your mud mixed up at that consistency, then you would add your sand. If I'm just going to use one large pan like this, I would just mix it in the pan by adding the sand. If you're mixing it on a larger project, you would mix it all at once what you think you're going to need. That way, the sand ratio is the same throughout the whole project. You don't want to run out halfway on the ceiling or the walls that you're doing, and then you have to mix another batch. And if you don't add the sand ratio the same, maybe this part that you did earlier, sand is a little more aggressive or less sand than the other parts. That's why you want to mix the sand ratio, mix it all up at one time for the whole project. Also, once you mix the sand and the mud, you're not going to be able to reuse this mud again. You could keep it if you had to do some touch-ups on your project later on. It'd probably hold for a couple months in a tub or bucket with a lid, but it's not going to last forever. So just whatever you mix up is going to go to waste. So just keep that in mind when you're doing your mix up for these, that whatever you mix up is going to end up getting wasted. So just use and mix what you're going to use so you don't waste too much materials. On here, I just mix a pan. I'm just dumping in the silica sand and I'm mixing it up thoroughly. And this gives it a sand appearance on the texture. With these skip trowels, it almost looks like when it dries, like a cement stucco skip trowel. I don't know if you're familiar with stucco, but there are some textures out there with stucco that look like a skip trowel that or look gritty. So once that drywall mud dries, it almost looks like a stucco appearance. So that's why they do it. It's not very common. You do not have to add sand to do a skip trowel. Adding sand's just a decorative option, and it just gives it a rough cement, sandy look when it dries and they paint it. This job has it. I can look at a picture and know automatically if there's sand in a skip trowel or not just by the appearance of it. So with this, we just add some silica sand and we're just going to skip trowel it all out. With the sand in it, it also helps it skip for some reason. The sand just skips off the knife, so it skips pretty easy. Skip troweling like this is just something you have to practice with. As you can see my hand motions with my knife, I'm not pushing down on the knife. I'm just gliding it over the surface and it's skipping, skipping, skipping. And the only way to get this skip pattern down is you're just going to have to practice it until you get it right. Don't just jump on the wall and start skip troweling if you don't know what you're doing. You're going to have to practice on an old piece of sheetrock or something until you get the pattern down. With this skip trowel, it's going one direction, so you got to follow the direction of the existing skip trowel. A lot of jobs I do that guys will fix themselves and they call me out to fix someone else's work. It's always the skip trowel's going the wrong direction. So that's step one. You got to go the same direction as existing. If you're doing a new wall or new ceiling, you can go any direction you want. You just want to keep the same direction throughout your whole texturing process. There's also skip trowels they call multi-directional skip trowel. It's basically they skip trowel every direction. So that's a fine way of doing skip trowel too. And sometimes that one's even better because it hides a lot more. It breaks up the straightness of everything, so it hides more imperfections if you do a multi-directional skip trowel. And the only way to figure out how to do this is practice. I also have a whole playlist of textures with many, many skip trowel videos. It's a real common texture out here with this skip trowel. I live in Phoenix, Maricopa County area in Arizona, so it's a lot of new homes out here, new builds, and a lot of houses that are 10, 20, 30 years old use this skip trowel. So it's a lot of newer houses out here that I do skip trowel on. And most of these houses are new builds, so about 10 years, 20 years, they start needing stress crack repairs, patches like this. So that's why I do a lot of skip trowel jobs. And people call me because that's what I do. I texture match specialty with texturing. It's more of an art skill, and just with me, it's just the years of doing it over and over and over to perfect my craft, my skill, and that's just all it is. Just practice makes perfect with these type of textures. But yeah, going to get it all skip troweled out, get it all textured. Once this texture's done, we're going to let it dry for at least a day or so. I give it 2 days. 1 day, sure, I'll be dry, but if you got time, just let it sit 2 full days. That way you know everything's nice and dry. Sand skip trowels. You do not sand before you paint. If I sanded this, I would sand out all the grit and the sand out of it. It'd probably look good. I've never seen it done, but I'm sure if you sanded it afterwards, you might create something that you like. So if you are practicing with doing different type of textures, try it. Maybe do it on a sample piece, do a sand finish texture with the skip trowel like this, and then sand it and see what you have. But more than likely, it's going to just flatten all the skip trowel texture, and it's going to knock out all the sand that you're going to see above. So you're not really going to see sand in it if you do sand it down with sandpaper before you primer and paint. But yeah, get it all textured out, just like all drywall repairs, patches, remodels, everything you do that involves mudding. You're going to have to primer everything before you paint. Always primer drywall. We have to primer it before paint because it's going to soak up all your paint, and paint is expensive. The other day I tried to get some high quality paint, and it was $70 for a gallon of paint. So that's why you got to use a primer. Primer is like $10 a gallon. It seals it all up. So when you go to paint, it's not going to soak up all your paint. It seals up the pores of the drywall mud, the texture, and it seals it up. So when you go to paint, the paint just goes over everything. It doesn't try to soak into your new texture, your patchwork, and stuff like that. So that's why you always primer drywall. Even the smallest nail hole you have to put primer on to a full remodel. Primer, 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 then paint. So always primer your drywall before paint. And if you don't, you're going to hate life when you go to paint because you're going to have to do one coat, and then it'll look okay, then it dries. Oh, second coat, oh, it looks good, then it dries. Then 3, 4, 5 coats of paint just to get it to seal in the drywall. So that's why I just use a quick primer over everything, quick one coat, and then you can paint it up and it'll look good. Especially on a patio like this, I just recommend to the homeowner just have the whole patio primered up. It just seals everything, protects everything. It gives it some barrier protection on the ceiling since it is outside patio and it gets exposed to the hot, cold, the wind, everything involved. So nice primer seal on the patio, a nice high quality exterior paint on this patio, and then this patchwork will last a long time on these seams. The only thing to crack it now after this and a nice good paint job would just be structural movement. But these are just common repairs. I think it's from lack of paint and the weathering that cause these cracks. Once one crack starts, they just keep spreading and spreading. So that's why you want to fix these stress cracks, peelings on patios. Once you see them, you want to scrape them and fix them right away. If you have patios on your house that need some work, stuff's peeling, your best bet when you got time is just to get up there and start scraping all that loose stuff off. And if you don't plan on mudding your patio and fixing stuff, at least scrape everything off and primer it all up. The primer will at least hold everything there and keep it from spreading and peeling more than it is. Then when you get time or want to hire someone, then they can just tape and mud over the damages that you primered over. That's no problem. The primer is just sealing it all up, preventing it from getting any worse. Get some protective seal on there until you can get to doing the mudding and texturing. But yeah, simple video like this. Hope you like it. Hope you leave a comment. Hope you subscribe. Thanks for viewing.